you. I suppose I'd like to talk first of all about the global economy.
Yes.
Now, obviously, it's just been 1 year on from the Lehman
Yes.
Brothers collapse. Which economies do you think are proving to be the hardest hit from the global financial slowdown?
Well, speaking for Asia, or maybe even the emerging markets in general, the states that have been performing best and those that are still enjoying positive growth are those where private consumption is a high percentage of GDP.
I see.
And these include countries like the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. So these economies, our economies, are outperforming the trade-dependent economies like Singapore and Hong Kong. So it looks like we will be avoiding recession altogether during this global crisis. Also, those of us who took the bitter medicine of reform years ago are also doing better, and that certainly is the case with the Philippines. But let me stress that as a whole, Asia has benefited from the experience of the 1997-98 financial crisis, economic crisis, and so therefore as a nation and a region we are all better prepared. And because of that experience, the prospects for growth in Southeast Asia today are some of the strongest in the world, and we already see early signs of recovery. Consumer confidence is back, capital is coming back, but at the end of the day, if the global financial system does not learn from its mistake and embrace reforms, all of us will lose even more than we have already. And that is why I'm stepping up the call for a reform of the global financial regulatory regime.
I see. What regulations in particular do you think need to be?
Well, you know, the G20 is going to be meeting soon, and I think they have to address this. We have to look at what happened. We have to look at the values or the lack of values that led to the collapse.
Right.
The unnecessary risk-taking, the opaque financial instruments, the fact that the financial systems are so interdependent. So when something happens in one system, the rest, there's a contagion. So what can we do to prevent such a contagion or even inoculate the global system against it?
Do you think that the industrialized or G20 nations need a coordinated approach?
They must. As I said, one big difference between the 1997 and 98 financial crisis and this one is that this one shows much more dramatically the interdependence of the world.
Right.
And so because of the financial interdependence of the world, then the response must also be coordinated.
And do you think it's the right time now for exit strategies? I mean, there is lots of talk about at the next G20 meeting forming an exit strategy for the G20 nations. Is it the right time for that?
You know, the problem is that we have not yet come up with the new reforms.
Right.
So I'm afraid that in the euphoria of the green shoots that are coming up, we see in fact some of the firms who brought us to this problem in the first place are the ones saying that are the ones now talking against the reform.
Right.
We still have to do that reform before we do our exit strategy.
Okay, I see. And do you think that there should be a different exit strategy for emerging markets, as you say, emerging markets that do have still positive economic growth?
Yes.
I mean, do you think that should be dealt with very differently?
There should be coordination, but there should also be differentiated policies.
Right.
Actually, the emerging markets, because of the previous crisis in the part of Asia, have done a lot of the reforms that should be done by the whole world.
I see.
So it is really the developed countries that need to do the reforms more. But of course, on our part, we make our contribution. For instance, the multilateralization of the Chiang Mai Initiative is our contribution to regional stability and world financial stability.
I see. Do you think that the IMF should give more control to emerging Asian economies?
Well, let me just say that one of the lessons is that we cannot continue to look at the world through the eyes of the G7 only.
Right.
There must be the G20 or even a G30. Because for one thing, the headlines keep screaming about Wall Street, lost fortunes. They should also scream about the impact of the crisis on the poor. And many of the poorest are in the emerging markets. So that's one. It affects the poor in the emerging markets very much, so they have a stake in a solution. And secondly, the emerging markets have done a lot of the emerging markets have done the reforms years ago, so they have also experience to share.
I see. What other countries do you think should be included if there was a G30? Who else?
Usually it's in accordance with the size of the economy.
Of course.
Yes. So,
more emerging markets.
Yes.
I see. Okay, and just looking sort of at the Philippine economy now, I know there has been a lot of changes in economic targets this year because of the crisis and the impact. What do you think is achievable this year for the Philippines in terms of, firstly, GDP growth and also levels of debt as well?
Well, we're expecting, although we have a deficit, we would have balanced the budget by last year if we did not have a world economic crisis.
Of course.
But we still have, compared to the rest of the world, we still expect a deficit that is modest enough.
Okay.
That will bring us to a balanced budget by 2013.
Okay.
And we are confident that we will achieve those targets because we have weathered the hardest part of the storm and we are poised for a rebound. One of the things that gives us confidence is the fact that foreign direct investment posted an 86% increase in the first 7 months of this year. Also, the overall business confidence index computed by the central bank has gone to positive territory for the first time since the third quarter of last year, and we expect this trend to continue for the rest of the year. Our stock and bond markets are growing, but the majority is from domestic investors, so that shows confidence.
I see. So, I know there is sort of been a target for a deficit this year. I think was it 250 billion pesos. Do you think that that's still achievable, or will that have to be widened?
Well, we will try to achieve it, but let me point out what Goldman Sachs has just said.
I was just going to ask you about that as well.
Concerns about our deficit, deficit are really overblown because we don't just look at what we would have wanted or we look at what it was last year, but look at this in the context of the rest of the world.
I see. Are there any targets for 2010 in terms of the
I leave that to my economic managers.
Okay,
my job is the strategic direction.
Sure. Okay. There was also a lot being written about Philippines and their international borrowings, potentially doing samurai bonds and other international borrowings as well. Is the cost of borrowing in international markets at the moment a deterrent, or is that...
Actually, the Philippines is doing well, very well in the bond market. Our credit rating was upgraded during the height of the crisis. And that saves us millions of dollars in interest that we can now pour into building up our economy.
I see. I was actually going to ask you about the credit ratings because, I mean, looking at the credit default swap market, the CDS contracts have fallen considerably this year and are below countries that have higher credit ratings than yourself. Do you think that it's warranted that the Philippines should have another upgrade or a higher?
Well, as far as we're concerned, I mean, it's the upgrade is a means to an end. The important thing is that we have good and narrow spreads, and that we can save millions of dollars so that we can put that money into building in human and physical infrastructure rather than wasting it on interest.
I see. Okay. Just looking at the peso now as well.
Yes.
I mean, as you said, Goldman Sachs today forecast that it would appreciate, I think, 4.7% in the next 6 months. Even though I think the peso has been the worst performing major currency in Asia this year,